Use your uniqueness and exploit it in the service of others.
And now, Kevin Rutherford on Trucking Business and Beyond.
Welcome, my friends. Welcome to my world. I'm your host, Kevin Rutherford. Phone lines are open. I'll be here for the next 3 hours. It's a free-for-all, anything goes. If you have a question, a comment, a topic about anything at all, pick up the phone right now and start dialing. You should be able to grab a line. We'll get to those calls here in just a little bit. 888-876-2336. The website is letstruck.com. The show is all about the business of trucking. I'll take your calls and answer your questions about everything trucking. Engines, performance, fuel mileage, modifications, trucks, taxes, money, financial planning, health on the road, getting started as an owner-operator, finding freight, working with brokers, you name it, we'll talk about it. All you have to do is pick up the phone and call. We'll be getting to those calls here in just a little bit. Looks like the lines are filling up, but keep dialing. We have lots of time today. I'll get to as many calls as I can. I have a couple topics. I don't think it's anything major, so we should be getting to the calls here in a little bit. I did read an article this morning. The FMCSA has been pretty busy officially denying exemptions to the ELD mandate. So lots of groups have applied as groups for exemptions to the ELD. Now, there have been a few that have been granted, but most are being turned down. Probably the big one in the group was OOIVA. But I think there were at least 10 others. Just all kinds of different groups and associations that said this was going to negatively affect them and they wanted an exemption. Doesn't look like the FMCSA is giving out any more exceptions right now because they turned them all down. I haven't heard much from the protest groups. I do see they have something planned for April 12th in D.C. I kind of doubt that that's going to be very effective. Just on the surface, my first thought was that's probably bad timing. April 12th, it could come across as a tax protest instead, being so close to April 15th, who knows. I honestly have said this before, I don't think protesting in D.C. is a very effective strategy for anything. When you look at some of the groups and how big they have been that make it to D.C., get all kinds of press, headlines, and yet nothing happens, it's not effective. Even if you manage to get a huge group, and I'm talking 100,000. We remember the Million Man March. What did that accomplish? And these trucking protest groups get about 50 people usually. I don't know that I've seen one break 100. But even if they did, I mean, we are nowhere near the kinds of numbers we've seen in other cases, and yet those things do next to nothing. If you don't like this, there are far more better ways of fighting it. But I think for the most part, ELDs are here. They're not going away. Work on maybe the hours of service, which they're already talking about. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that. If you want to talk about it, you certainly can. I just saw that they kind of put out this blanket statement about all of these exemptions they have turned down. So it looks like we're over the exemption thing. ELDs are here. They're permanent. This is the new working method that we have, and it's here to stay. So the other thing that I'm seeing again in the news, and I've talked about this a little bit before, but this is a pretty major change. I've talked about the sharing economy, the gig economy, a lot of new, we could call them business opportunities being created by this move into app-based work. So Uber is the big one, and Uber is kind of the one that kicked a lot of this off. If you had a car, you downloaded Uber's app and you were in business. Probably the easiest business to get into in the history of the world. I worked harder to start a lemonade stand when I was 8 than people have to work today to be in business. Now, that's a good thing and it's a bad thing. I love small business. I love freedom. I love the idea of working for yourself. So when I first saw this, I thought, this is fantastic. The downside is, and if you listen to this show, you've heard me use this phrase for 20 plus years. I've said this forever. And this is a great example of it. But this is just business in general. The easier a business is to start, the less money you're going to make at that business overall. That's a pretty blanket statement, but it works at least 99% of the time because of supply.
Continue on this road for 33 miles.
And demand. This is why I use that term a lot, supply and demand. If you understand how supply and demand works, then you
Continue on this road for 33 miles.
understand pricing and profit potential in any type of business. In order to understand how much profit potential there is in a business, you just have to understand supply and demand because it works across the board. There are no exceptions. So if a business is really easy to get into, there will be a lot of competition, meaning a lot of supply, and that supply will always overcome the demand. And prices will drop, and sometimes they will drop dramatically. And that is the case with the sharing economy and the gig economy. Uber and Lyft being the two big names in the ride sharing. But we're also talking about Airbnb. That's a little more difficult to get into business. Just about everybody has a car. Not everybody has space in their home that they could rent out as an Airbnb. So it's a little tougher. So there's still profit in that segment. That's actually a pretty good segment where technology has really created some opportunities, and there's still profit potential there. In fact, I am registered with Airbnb. Just we're not actively using it right now, but I've got a property up on Airbnb. We just don't make it available right now. So I still see profit potential there, and I think it'll stay that way. But all of these apps and services that use a vehicle, that's kind of a crazy future. One, like I said, very hyper competitive because just about everybody has a vehicle. And two, we have autonomous technology moving into that space as well. And Uber, the one that created the opportunity, has also put a lot of money into autonomous to take those jobs or those contracts back away from people as well. So that's an interesting segment. But here's the big change that you really have to stop and think about. New York City has now instituted a minimum wage on these types of services. That is, I have a hard time getting my head around that. First off, I don't even like minimum wage. I don't even think there should be a minimum wage. If I choose as an individual that I want to go work for somebody for $2 an hour, I should be allowed to do that. Nobody should have to make sure that I get paid a minimum amount of money. So I'm not a fan of minimum wages at all. I know that's not a very popular opinion, but it is my opinion. But I certainly can't get my head around a minimum wage for somebody who is in business. Now, I say either change the law so that these people are not independent contractors. And I'd rather not see that, but that would make more sense than instituting a minimum wage on somebody who is not an employee. They were not hired by Uber. They were not hired by Lyft. They downloaded an app and they used their vehicle to start earning money. They work when they want. They don't have to work at all if they don't want to. They can take one ride a week or 0 rides or 100 rides a week. They have total freedom on whether or not to work, where to work, when to work. That is an independent contractor. It's their vehicle. In fact, I talked about this once before. Uber is making the argument, and I think it is a brilliant argument. Uber is making the argument, look, they're not even independent contractors. They are customers of ours. We have a software app. They use that software app from us, and they pay us to use that app. That makes them a customer of ours, not an employee, not an independent contractor. I think that is a brilliant argument. And I don't see that much difference between what Uber does with cars. Here, look, we have an app. We will match you with a rider. That's all we're going to do. You have a vehicle. There are riders out there that use our app. You use our app, and we match you up. You are a customer of ours. How is that any different from what Uber's doing in trucking? We have an owner-operator who has a truck and trailer. They download the Uber app. They get freight from Uber. They move it. They are technically a customer of Uber, although it gets a little more complicated because Uber has to be a broker in the trucking world. So still, the owner-operator, in my opinion, this is a clear business transaction. It's just not clear on who the customer is. In one sense, I'm Uber's customer because I'm using their software. In another sense, they're my customer because they're paying me to move freight. But I don't see that it's all that different. This is why I stay on top of this issue, because we are going to have bleed over on some of these regulations because it's just not that different. Now, here's the minimum wage, and let's think about this. I've tried to find some more details. The minimum wage they set was like $28 and something an hour. But then what really got me was that they said it needs to equate to $17.22 an hour after expenses. Now I am really confused. Why are we throwing in an after expense number? Because you can't ever predict that. Able to say based on, again, I don't know where they got their numbers. You might be able to say that the average Uber driver, if we pay him $28 an hour, the average after expenses would be $17. But if I have really high expenses, what if I'm only making $9 an hour after expenses? Now what? This is really opening up a can of worms, in my opinion. Really, I think I would rather see New York City either outlaw, and a lot of cities have tried, or fight the fight that these people are not independent contractors and try to decide it that way. But to institute a minimum wage for somebody who is considered to be in business, that's crazy. I have a hard time getting my head around that. We can talk about that or anything else you want to talk about. In fact, right after this break, I'm going to get to your calls and questions. 888-876-2336. We'll be right back.